So, students, we will continue with the lesson. So, today we will be discussing about what sources do historians use in writing about the last 250 years of Indian history. How do we know it? How do we know it? So, the first topic we have here is administration produces records. So, through the help of records, we can know about the sources that the historians have used in the last 250 years ago in the Indian history. So, the first we have to look at is one important source is the official records of the British administration. So, how do we know about the sources? It is through the official records. We know about the sources of the historians through the official records. The British believed that the act of writing was important. Every instruction, plan, policy, decision, agreement, investigation had to be clearly written up. Once this was done, things could be properly studied and debated. This conviction produced an administrative culture of memos, notings, and reports. So, students, during the British rule, historians gave more importance to the writings. It is because of this reason every instruction or plan or policy or agreement, everything was written down. It was written down in order to preserve it for the future use. As we know from the text, it was kept for study purpose and for the purpose of debate. The British also felt that all important documents and letters needed to be carefully preserved. So, they set up record rooms attached to all administrative institutions. The village Tahsildar's office, the collectorate, the commissioner's office, the provincial secretariats, the law courts all had their record rooms. Specialized institutions like archives and museums were also established to preserve important records. So, students, in order to preserve the documents and the letters during the British rule, they had attached an office of record room to every offices. Letters and memos that moved from one branch of the administration to another in the early years of the 19th century can still be read in the archives. You can also study the notes and reports that district officials prepared, or the instructions and directives that were sent by officials at the top to provincial administrators. In the early years of the 19th century, these documents were carefully copied out and beautifully written by calligraphists. So, who are the calligraphists here? They are specialized in the art of beautiful writing. So, calligraphists are those who are specialized in the art of beautiful writing. By the middle of the 19th century, with the spread of printing, multiple copies of these records were printed as proceedings of each government department. The next subtopic we have is surveys become important. The practice of surveying also became common under the colonial administration. The British believed that a country had to be properly known before it could be effectively administered. So students, British also believed that in order to rule a country, they need to learn about the country, or they have to investigate the country properly so that they can administer it in a proper manner. By the early 19th century, detailed surveys were being carried out to map the entire country. In the villages, revenue surveys were conducted. The effort was to know the topography, the soil quality, the flora, the fauna, the local histories, and the cropping pattern. All the facts seen as necessary to know about to administer the region. From the end of the 19th century, census operations were held every 10 years. These prepared detailed records of the number of the people in all the provinces of India, noting information on castes, religions, and occupation. There were many other surveys like botanical surveys, zoological surveys, archaeological surveys, anthropological surveys, forest surveys, etc. So students, during the British rule, they gave lot of importance to surveys, because in order to rule a country, they must do survey so that they can understand and find out about the region or the country. It is because of that reason they also conducted the census, so that they could find out about how many people live in a particular region and what are the occupation they practice. Through the surveys, they also came to know about the topography of the region, the soil quality, the flora and fauna of the region, and the cropping pattern, so that they can take the maximum advantages of the place. The next subtopic we have is what official records do not tell. So we have already studied about the official records. So now we will see what official records do not tell. From this vast corpus of records, we can get to know a lot. But we must remember that these are official records. They tell us what the officials thought, what they were interested in and what they wished to preserve for posterity. These records do not always help us understand what other people in the country felt and what lay behind their actions. Dear students, it simply means it did not value the poor people of the country. It gave value only to the rich and the dignitaries and the important people. But the poor people were left out. They were not given any value during the British rule. And this does not present and it is not recorded in the official record. For that, we need to look elsewhere. When we begin to search for these other sources, we find them in plenty, though they are more difficult to get than official records. We have diaries of people, accounts of pilgrims and travelers, autobiographies of important personalities, and popular booklets that were sold in the local bazaars. As printing spread, newspapers were published and issues were debated in public. Leaders and reformers wrote to spread their ideas. Poets and novelists wrote to express their feelings. So, students, we can find out about the situation of the poor people through the diaries of people and accounts of pilgrimages, etc. As printing spread, newspapers were published and issues were debated in public. Leaders and reformers wrought to spread their ideas. Please remember it. The leaders and the reformers wrought to spread their ideas, whereas the poets and novelists wrought to express their feelings. All these sources, however, were produced by those who were literate. From these, we will not be able to understand how history was experienced and lived by the tribals and the peasants, the workers in the mines, or the poor on the streets. Getting to know their lives is a more difficult task. So, students, in order to understand the situation of the poor people, these sources are not sufficient. We cannot know properly about those poor people through these documents and through these records. In order to know about them, we have to go through their experiences. But to get those experiences, it is very difficult through the official records and the documents. So, students, here only we complete our first chapter. So, today we have studied about three subtopic entitled Administration Produces Records. Administration produces records. And second subtopic we have seen today is surveys become important. Surveys become important. And the final subtopic today we have seen is what official records do not tell. What official records do not tell. I hope you have understood the lesson. If you have any queries, any clarification, please contact me.